so red and the war's here. You're never will it ever end me. I like ice, but you brought it on yourself, cause it was about war. 58 counties screaming for the mind. The war's coming forth, never with the disguise. Another A-bomb for you, who really wants it. Shroud medals in my vocabulary. Rolling with the punches, I'm roll beating and jumping. Dealing with the problems, I got to be coping. Making it fit, and I click just like a Lego. I'll be Casio, but you can be Tango from the FBI to the CIA. I'm clearing out the path and here to LA. I be from C-Town, kicking the roof down, ripping up the mic and way past sundown. As a world turn. As a world turn.
A show that I have been waiting to do for about the last 2 years, I would say. The Ducks are finally back in the playoffs, and we are diving deep into it, trying to get another one of these. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Prospects of the Land. I'm Tavin McCulley, and as always, joined by my co-host, Nate Bope. Nate, how are we doing today with the bubbles?
Yeah, the bubbles are kind of dying down, so I think we're going to put them away right now. But it's playoff time, baby. The team I interned for, the team you follow closely, the Akron Rubberducks, are back into the postseason, and that is the main meat here of this episode today. We're going to be breaking down the series against the Erie Seawolves. Tavin, this is going to be a really tough matchup for the Akron Rubberducks, but we'll tell you why. You know, there are a lot of concerns from both teams going into that series, but as usual, we'll start with you. How is life? How is everything going?
Good. Obviously, everything's kind of for this week leading up to tomorrow. I mean, been waiting almost 3 years for just to get back in the playoffs. So obviously, best of three, you got to really bring your best. Obviously, we talked to Lake County play-by-play announcer yesterday. So
thank you again to Logan Petoskey for jumping on the pod with us. Really appreciate his insight and everything else.
But like he said, I mean, there's no room for error. It's a best of three. You either have it or you don't. So it's obviously going to be just a great game tomorrow. Your boy Austin Peterson's on the bump. We're going to dive into that later, but it's just going to be a huge series for the Ducks.
Yeah, but before we could talk about that series with the Ducks, I mean, we'll obviously tell you how they did in their previous series. We're going to sort of recap that last. We're going to do a little bit of a weird order. Usually we start from the bottom and we go up. We start with Lynchburg and go up to Columbus. Obviously, Lynchburg's season is done, but we're in Lake County's in playoffs right now. So we're going to start with the team that is still in the regular season, and that is the Columbus Clippers. Hey, they lost that series opening game against St. Paul, but they were able to take 5 of 6. This team is still looking really hot. And Tavin, their magic number right now, 1. That is all they need. 1 win or 1 loss from the Indianapolis Indians, and the Columbus Clippers will be playing postseason baseball. They get to finish up with the Toledo Mud Hens. I don't really have any concerns about the Clippers making the playoffs. Toledo's been a sub 500 team for most of the year. They might be around 500 right now. I don't have the actual standings in front of me, but regardless, yes, you end the season on the road, but a team that you can well get at least 2 games out of, which is what you would like to have happen. But that's it. Magic number is 1, man. As long as they don't get swept, the Clippers are going to the playoffs.
Yeah, for sure. I don't see a world where we really don't make the playoffs. 6 games, I don't think you're going to get swept. And even if you would somehow, I don't think Indy's going to win out. So obviously you mentioned the magic number is 1.
I would be interested to find out actually who the Indianapolis Indians have. I will take a look at that here in a minute. I'll pull that up. I didn't think to pull that up before.
Well, like I was saying, I mean, you just have a talented roster down the line. Pitching staff's obviously been great all year, and you've absorbed what Akron has now. You had Andrew Walters for a stretch. He's up with the big leagues now, but you still have Doug Nikhazy, Ryan Webb. Those guys are going to be phenomenal for you.
And you now have Tyler Freeman down there, because who was it that got called up?
Angel Martinez. So.
Yeah, that's right. Yep, Angel Martinez is back with the big league club. And who knows, we could see a lot more movement here as, again, if we have some time, might talk a little bit of guard ball and what their magic number is. The Indianapolis Indians close with the team that the Clippers just played in St. Paul. So, I mean, the St. Paul has struggled really all year, but it is a road series. St. Paul has given the Clippers some trouble. So, and Indianapolis has lost their past 2 games. They lost Saturday and Sunday against Rochester. I think the Clippers are pretty much well in that playoff spot. And if they do happen to clinch it next week, will be another huge, massive playoff series preview. We already did the captains. Obviously, we're doing the Ducks today. Next week, we could have a series preview for the Clippers as well.
For sure. Yeah.
Okay, so with the Clippers needing one win there, I mean, it looks very likely that 3 out of the 4 affiliate teams will be making the postseason. I think that deserves a round of applause. That's something that you usually don't see a lot in minor league baseball. Usually maybe 1, maybe 2, especially with how few teams make the postseason. The Guardians have 3, and man, it just speaks to the talent that is within this organization. They got a lot of really, really good players within there. Let's go ahead and jump on in here to Lake County, because if you watched our episode yesterday, little special episode previewing the final series, we thank you. And again, we thank Logan Petoskey for joining us there on that. And if you are watching this, shout out Logan. You were amazing yesterday, but it was a very close game and no team started off really well pitching. I mean, 2 runs for Lake County in the top of the first, 3 runs for the Timber Rattlers in the bottom of the first. Each team scored a run in the second, and then Lake County able to get a run in the fourth. But the one that brought it home, the run in the bottom of the 8th by the Timber Rattlers, I'll get you who drove in the run here in just 1 minute. So what ended up happening was Jeremy Vargas reached on a fielder's choice out. Martinez was able to throw to Mooney to get someone out at third base. But there was a runner on second because of that. Couple outs later, Cooper Pratt hits a double on a ground ball to the left fielder, Jonah Advincula. Vargas was able to come around from second to score, and that was ultimately what sealed the game, as Lake County did have some runners on, I believe 1 runner on in the bottom half of the frame, but a quick double play ended pretty much any hope of completing that comeback there. But still, overall, I mean, some really good performers and exactly what we kind of expected and talked about yesterday. Wisconsin had 10 hits in that game. They had, I think, 12 base runners. I think they had 12 hits. 10 hits, 12 base runners. I don't know why I thought I had my numbers mixed up there. 10 hits, 12 base runners. Again, the long ball didn't really help them, but like we talked about, they play small ball. They get on base. They move runners really well. And I mean, just looking at Jacob Kozart behind the plate, couldn't throw anybody out yesterday. They stole a ton of bases. I'd be really curious to actually see how many bases the Timber Rattlers stole. I did not look at that. So we'll take a look here. Adams was able to steal. Wow. Okay. Adams had 4 stolen bases yesterday. Lara ended up having 1. So there you go. That's a total of 5 stolen bags for the Timber Rattlers in that past game. That's something that the captains are going to have to clean up. Taven, what big adjustments do the captains have to make sure that they're able to force a game 3 tomorrow night?
So I think for one, it was the starting pitching. Obviously, Mulchard got rocked early. I mean, we're just going to kind of call it how it was. He gave up 3 runs, and he didn't really even make it out of the first. But the bullpen picked up his slack. Spivey came in.
Yeah, Spivey came in.
Spivey came in. He pitched 4 2/3 innings pitched. He only gave up a run. And then Jacobs and Driver really followed. Just had a great game. The bats were rolling for Lake County. I mean, Ralphie Velasquez had a big hit, and Antunez had a big hit on Hell You Know.
Rolling would be the right word, but I mean, Antunez had himself a day. He went 3 for 5, 1 RBI. I just couldn't really find that clutch hit for the rest of the lineup. Mooney was walked 3 times. Fox ended up having a really bad day, 0 for 5 with 4 strikeouts. Bazana was able to get on base, but in some really big moments, you saw him swing and miss at strike 3. The clutch hitting that we saw from Lake County in that previous series against Dayton just wasn't there. And it's something that I spoke on yesterday that needed to be there, and it needed to show up. It didn't show up in game 1, so the final home game for Wisconsin of the 2024 series was a win. You get the possibility of 2 more games here, and I just think what needs to turn around is you have Matt Wilkinson on the mound there for game 2. I think a lot of people would agree with me in saying he is the best pitcher that this organization has right now, at least in the starting role. He's got to be lights out. He cannot allow runners, because we saw what happens, right? If they get runners on, even if it's just a simple walk or a single, everybody on that team can steal bases. Everybody on that team can run.
Yeah.
And that is very, very dangerous, especially against the guy like Matt Wilkinson, who, for as good of a pitcher as he is subsequent to having those blow up type games to where he just isn't finding his stuff. He's got to provide his best stuff. I think this lineup has to hit a little bit more, and I think they have to hit more consistently throughout the lineup. I love it for Antunes that he went 3 for 5. You got to get Hanau in there to hit some. You have to get Fox in there to hit some. Velasquez has a hit. Good. Let him hit more. Collado, he's got to be able to get a hit. Advincula, he's got to be able to get a hit. Cozart, where was his bat? He's got to step up and maybe even throw out a runner or two at second. That would help out a lot. And I think you saw, if you watched that game, some frustration with Jacob Cozart on just a couple of plays where he felt like he should have had that runner. I think even at one point in the 6th or 7th inning, he was so upset with himself, he went and slammed his hand right on the home plate because he bobbled the ball and felt like he could have had that runner out. I mean, it's just a lot of the little adjustments that need to be made. The quality start for Wilkinson has to be there, because I think if that's the one thing you were to go back and change about game 1, that's probably what you would change, right? You would change how your starting pitching fared. You would change that, hey, maybe Maltrud was able to get us a quality start. Maybe we go out and win game 1, even with just those 4 runs. Again, 4 runs is not a bad number to put up, but when you play a team that plays small ball and gets on base a lot and can have those big innings running the bases really well, if the bats get hot, you need to have that quality pitching. And I've rambled on here forever, so we'll have you jump in here, Tavin, and kind of talk a little bit. But if the quality start from Wilkinson is there, I think the captains take game 2, and then it's all on the line in game 3.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think, like you said, I mean, rolling might have not been the word, but I mean, they came through in a couple big situations. I mean, Hanau had a sack. Yeah. Hanau had a sack fly. But again, they have to kind of cash in on when there were 2 to 3 guys on the base paths, and then Mooney struck out, obviously looking in a big spot on a ball that was very 50-50, and that would have walked a go-ahead run in. So just stuff like that. And then I really think the Rattlers,
they had
Timber
the bases
Rattlers,
loaded in the bottom of the 5th, bottom of the 6th, and they couldn't get anybody home. That was a huge spot.
for sure. I mean, the Timber Rattlers, they did what they did. They hit the ball and they stuck to their strengths. They gave up the same amount of runs in 4, but I mean, guys that we were saying to look out for, like Cooper Pratt, and he had a huge double that drove it a run, and that's ultimately what won the game for the Timber Rattlers. So
Adams getting on base 3 of 5 times, and again stealing 4 bags, like I mentioned earlier. That can't be something that happens for the captains again in game 2.
Right. And if you're Lake County, obviously you didn't get the best start at a Maltrud. So in game 2, you're going to go with your ace. You're going to go with the main guy that everybody's coming to see. It's Matt Wilkinson. He's been the vocal point in the second half all year for this Lake County team, and I think he's going to give you a good start. And like I said yesterday, I thought the Timber Rattlers were going to get game 1. But once you go into that atmosphere in Lake County and you play them with those screaming fans, and Matt Wilkinson, I think, is going to thrive on that energy tomorrow night in Lake County. I think they're going to go out strong, get the W, and ultimately push a game 3, which who knows what could happen with DeLucia on the mound. So
yeah, exactly. And I think the big adjustments that are going to have to be made there, again, you need quality starts from both Wilkinson and DeLucia, because we know if the Timber Rattlers get their bats rolling, I mean, you saw it there in game 1. If they get people on base, and look, this bullpen got out of some really, really tough spots. There were runners on base, I think, at one point throughout the first 4 or 5 innings, but the captain's bullpen was able to get them out of some jams. That has to continue to be a theme. It was a theme against Dayton as well. It has to continue to be a theme here against the Timber Rattlers. You need your quality starts, and I just think you need to distribute the hits a little bit more. Baseball is as team sport as team sports gets. Yes, one guy can be really, really good, but ultimately he only takes 3, 4, maybe 5 if they bat around that much of the team's at bats. You need everybody to hit. You need everybody to contribute in some way, whether that's offensively or defensively. And we saw Travis Bazzana make a phenomenal defensive play yesterday, the leaping catch there at second. Everyone has got to contribute, and I think that will bode well for the captain series win.
Yeah, 100%. But I mean, we've kind of touched on a lot of Lake County as of late. Do we want to kind of swing into the big news while everybody's here?
Yeah, we do. Yeah, we do. We want to dive on in to the Akron Rubberducks. And before we dive on into the playoff series, they did not finish well against the Hartford Yard Goats, I think they lost their past 3 games after taking the first 3 in that series.
Let me check that really quick.
Off the top of my head, I believe that is what it happened.
So yeah, they took the first 3 and then lost the second 3.
I mean, you started out that series really, really hot. Then you get shut out on Friday. Your momentum, your wind is taken out of your sail on Saturday, and then a crushing, almost come from behind defeat or a come from behind win on Sunday leads you to lose that game as well. So kind of what we were talking about, and that you want to be hot entering this postseason. And after the sweep of Bowie, I mean, you only won 1 game against Richmond, and that was the Sunday game. And then you continued that win streak on to win 3 against Hartford, but you didn't really finish all that well. I think the momentum is going to have to find something here. And I do think it's going to take a couple of innings, which is really dangerous to say, because as we're about to talk about in a minute, this is an Erie team that hits the ball all over the yard. I mean, every major category that you look at, they're going to be in the top 3, at least in the Eastern League. They're top 3 in batting average, home runs, hits, OPS. They are an extremely, extremely good offensive team. But we are going to start previewing, sort of recapping the season here for the Akron Rubberducks and telling you who some top performers are to watch out for in this one. We will start, of course, with the hitting side because, Akron's had a lot of players move up and down here. Obviously, Chase DeLauder started out with the team. That's probably the biggest name. He's now in Columbus, but you are able to fill in his shoes with CJ Kafis, who has just been absolutely outstanding. Again, we want to send all the prayers and thoughts and whatever else you send to Petey Halpin for dealing with his injury. That is a huge loss to this team, but you got 2 guys with 16 home runs here in Alexri Planas and Khalil Watson. Both of them are healthy right now. Again, we've already touched on CJ Kafis leads this team among qualified hitters in batting average. Mikel Ramirez has a better batting average, but doesn't play as much. Cooper Ingle, again, hasn't been with the team as much, but is hitting 281 right now. But I mean, how about some of the newcomers to this team, right? I know we talk about a lot of the mainstays here, like Planes, like Watson and Tolentino and Bracho and Valdez, and a lot of the guys.
You guys have come up on top, though, like a lot. I mean, you have Turner, Lipscomb, Ingle, Jorge Burgos. I mean, just all of those guys have just easily came in and stepped in when Petey Halpin goes down. And then you have guys Burgos in the bullpen, Mangus Ellerts and Zane Morehouse, who have filled in for guys like Trey Benton. So it's just all the entire team.
And we'll talk about the bullpen here more in a minute, but I think the thing that you want to look at on the batting side, again, as you mentioned, all of these new guys coming in, Turner and Lipscomb and Ingle, all of them right now have a better batting average than CJ Kafis. And obviously with the team, and I'm talking about batting average with the Akron Rubberducks, okay? All of them have a better batting average with Akron than CJ Kafis does, and me and you both think that CJ Kafis is one of the better prospects this organization has out of the clear and obvious top 5. But I mean, you go ahead and you take a look at some of these stat lines here. I mean, Tyrese Turner in 14 games, 11 hits and 35 at bats. He's drove, I believe, 5 runs in. I'm going to fact check that that's the right column. Yes, it is. Has a home run. His walk to strikeout ratio is not super fantastic, but he has a .856 OPS. He's hitting 314. Guy Lipscomb has a home run, couple RBIs, but his walk to strikeout ratio is darn near 1. He's hitting 273 with a darn near 8 OPS. Cooper Ingle, we talked about him a lot when he was in Lake County. As look, you hit 300 as a catcher. That's just insane. He's hitting 281, which is still an insane number through 25 games. 2 home runs for him. And Jorge Burgos, who you mentioned, is sort of one of those guys that's been struggling. He's only hitting 127, but in only 15 games for the Ducks, he's hit 3 home runs, and that is absolutely massive.
Big home run guy. You obviously talk about Ingle, and he's just been phenomenal, but another guy who's really stepped up as of late is another catcher on the team, Cody Huff. I mean, he's hit 245, which is a really solid number to be at hitting-wise for a catcher, and he's got 7 home runs, so he's got a little bit of power onto that bat. But the thing that you get out of Cody Huff, which not a lot of people get, but Gavin Williams has said it when he was rehabbing, and I think anybody else you ask will, is Cody Huff behind the plate is like Austin Hedges behind the plate. Just amazing. He's making any pitcher on that mound way better, and that's why I want him. I'll go into who I believe, in my opinion, should be the starting lineup for next week, but I really want Cody Huff behind that plate. Maybe for all
Yeah, I
three
think we'll
games.
put,
No disrespect for Cooper Ingle at all, because his bat's better than Cody Huff's, but I believe Cody Huff behind the plate just brings more from the pitching side of things, so I would like to see him there. But that's just another guy, in my opinion, who's been doing good. Another guy is Guy Lipscomb. After he hit that walk-off, he's taken a turn for the better. The last 2 series, his numbers have just been way better than what they were when he started.
We talked about his slow start, right? We talked about the
Yeah.
fact that when he came up from Lake County, he was slow and he didn't really get it going. And then the walk-off, I think you even interviewed him afterwards, and he told you, like, yeah,
that's
let's
exactly
hope that
what he was
walk-off.
saying.
Yeah, let's hope that walk-off sparks something.
And it
What
did.
do you know?
And then
What do you know?
and obviously your stats aren't going to be great once you make that jump to a different level. It doesn't matter who you are, but he's sort of figured things out, and he's just been great in the field. Another guy kind of the same way, Tyrese Turner, who struggled not a ton, but a little bit when he got up, and he's just been, whenever he's able to get in the game, just amazing. So a big part in this series is just going to be those young pieces to kind of fill in the gaps. But then again, you have those veterans kind of talents that you can put a lot on too. Tolentino's still there, who has been there for the last year and a half. You have Yordis Valdez, who's been there. Dion Frias. Obviously, CJ Kafis has been up there for a little bit. Joe Lampe's just been amazing out in the field and on the offensive side. So you still have those bats to lean on. And I think on the offensive side, although you have lost a lot with DeLauder and Petey Halpin, you still have a lot to build on for this playoff series.
And let's give some context to CJ Kafis, right? Looking at his stats and splits right here, this is why that we here rave about CJ Kafis, Tavin and I. This is why we absolutely love him. I mean, for this Rubberducks team, I'm going to go through these stats in a minute, but I want to highlight CJ Kafis for just 1 second. He's only played 67 games with the Akron Rubberducks this season. Meanwhile, you have guys like Planez and Tolentino and Valdez and Frias and Lampe that have played over 100 games. And while they're close, I mean, they still don't have as many RBIs as CJ Kafis does in almost half the number of games. This is why we rave about CJ Kafis. There, throughout most of the season with Akron, has not been one player on a consistent basis that has been able to give you RBIs. One night, it could come from Watson. The next night, it could come from Tolentino. The next night, maybe Joe Lampe or Dion Frias steps up to the plate. You just never know with this team, and that's also a very good problem to have, and it can be very scary if you're in a situation where you need someone to come through and you have a certain part of the order up and you don't really know what that guy is going to bring you. CJ Kafis is that guy. If he's at the plate in a big spot, you know he's going to hit the ball hard. You know he's going to try to put that thing in play. And he has been that player for the Rubberducks ever since he's gotten up there that you can rely on a consistent basis. Planez is going to have his nights where, yeah, he's tied for the team lead in home runs. He's going to have his 0 for 5 nights with 4 strikeouts. That's just the style of baseball that Planez plays. Milan Tolentino is going to have himself really good games, then he'll really struggle. That's been a theme with every Akron hitter this year, except for one, and that's CJ Kafis. That's why we rave about him so much. That's why we love him, and that's why he's such an important addition to this team.
100%. I think you nailed it home. Kafis is obviously going to be the main vocal point in that offense going forward, so I really just think a lot of this series on the offensive side is going to be up to him.
So let's talk about kind of where we expect this lineup to be, right? And then we'll obviously dive into the pitching side for all of you people that might not be too familiar with Akron. Hey, there we go. There's a very nice graphic. Well done, sir. Okay, so expected lineup. What do you kind of, I think you said you would put one together. I mean, if I'm looking at it, you have to play Kafis every day.
Yeah, we'll go through yours first.
So I'm just going to kind of make one up on the fly. I don't really have one prepared. Just kind of looking at things. You have to play Kafis every single day. I think you have to play Tolentino every single day. I think you have to play Valdez every single day because his bat has gotten a lot better. And you know me. And you know me. I rave about his defense. He might be the best defensive player in the entire Eastern League. The catcher situation.
You forget about Connor Cox.
The catcher, he's not an active player. With all due respect to Connor Cox, we can kind of push that over there because he's not on the active roster. Cody Huff and Cooper Ingle at the catcher position. I think to your point, that's kind of one of the talking points I want to talk about here for a couple minutes, because as we're about to talk about here in maybe 10 to 15 minutes, Erie can hit. They are a team that can rake. And That's again, when you have catchers of this nature, even when you throw Mikel Ramirez in that mix as well. Obviously, I think with Cooper Ingle up, I think his upside's a little bit better than what Mikel Ramirez brings to the table. But I mean, when you take a look at I think the two main catchers we'll see, and that's Cody Huff and Cooper Ingle here in this series. What do you want? If you need defense behind the plate, you're going to go with Cody Huff. But at the same time, you want a bat in the lineup. And this is no disrespect to Cody Huff at all. He's hitting 245 with seven home runs, has brought 28 RBIs, and he's done really well with the bat.
For sure.
Cooper Ingle's bat is better.
Oh, I mean, Cooper Ingle's bat's the best
better.
I think every catcher across every minor league all year. I mean, it's just been insane. I don't think there's another guy that's hitting over 300. Do you?
At least that we know of.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
100%.
But that's the interesting dichotomy. And that I think we've talked about this in certain ways when we've talked a little bit about the Guardians on the show is who do you play? In what situation do you play them? Does it matter who's pitching? Does it matter what the lineup looks like? I think it absolutely matters what Erie has done, especially in game one here. If Erie wins game one, I mean, Akron has to go all guns blazing, and Cooper Ingle's defense behind the plate, look, it is not bad. He's still a pretty good defensive catcher. Cody Huff is just way, way better, and that's no disrespect to Cooper Ingle at all. So it's kind of one over the other. Now, you can still rely on Cody Huff's bat, and you can still rely on Cooper Ingle's defense, but to your point, Tavin, I mean, you said you wanted to see Cody Huff play every single day. I think you got to play Cooper Ingle for at least one game here, and maybe it's that first game. Maybe you make that offensive statement and say, look, we're not going to play around here. I would use a much different word if this wasn't a podcast, but like, look, man, we're not going to play around. Like, we're going to throw everything at you. We're going to throw our best bats at you.
Yeah,
I think it's up to what Greg DeCenzo wants to do with the catching position.
And we've seen him use his fair share of pinch hitters. So I could very well just middle of the game, 6th inning. He wants to do something else, make a switch. So I could very well see both of them.
We'll go through your lineup here, sir. I think I've talked about all I want to talk about at least. And so go through your lineup at least for what you want to see. Who do you think, with Akron being at home for game one, because Erie obviously has home field advantage, who is your projected lineup here? I should say, what is your projected lineup?
I have been thinking about this ever since before we clinched. I would say a solid month. And with the injury to Petey Halpin going down, it has changed a little bit. I actually threw a graphic here.
Whoa, okay. I didn't know this. Here we go.
Exactly on who I would like to see and where. So we're going to start with the catching position. We'll save DH for last. Obviously, we just raved about it. Cody Huff, I think he brings a ton to the defensive side. And I think, obviously, in game one, you can kind of sacrifice a bat to bring that defense. So I'm going to go with Cody Huff. CJ Kafis, obviously, Akron only has really three guys that can play that position. Yeah, go ahead.
I think we can skip over your infield right now because that is exactly mine as well. Kafis has to play it first, and he has to be in the lineup. And with the amount of outfielders they have, I don't want him playing
guys that can play it.
Yeah, and I don't want him playing the outfield.
Bracho and Frias.
And I don't want Kafis playing the outfield at all. I'd rather have him at first base. Watson at second base is fantastic. You know what I'm going to say about Yordis Valdez and his defense at shortstop. And then Tolentino for a team that, like, every single game just seems like they have struggled to really find that piece to solidify at the third base side. I do really like Milan Tolentino at third base. The other guy I could see in there playing, and I bet you he's going to play in this series, is Dion Frias, who's played the most games out of anybody for the Ducks so far this season. But I do like Tolentino at third base a lot better. Just because of the bat.
For sure. I mean, Tolentino, his defense has been as good as Valdez in some aspects. And then you have Yordis. I think those are third and short, no question about it. The thing when I was creating this lineup is, where do you put Khalil Watson? He's a guy that can play second. He can play the outfield. If you want to put him in the outfield, and here's my thing with Khalil Watson, because he's not a bad fielder at second, but I do believe Frias is a better fielder, but I'm making the defensive sacrifice with Huff instead of Engel, so I'm going to throw Khalil Watson in. I do believe he is a much better defensive outfielder, like when Greg DeCenzo decides to throw him in left or center. But I'm going to put him in second because there's just more options out there. And Bracho's defense hasn't been great at second base. He can play first. He has a great bat, but he just can't figure it out at second. So I don't want him there either. Therefore, kind of by default, the only guy that I really want to plug in there is Watson. Now, when you move to the outfield, it gets a lot trickier. Obviously, Joe Lampe's going to be a lock. And you've had almost both your center fielders go down this season, and Lampe was playing a lot of left, but I'm going to slide him over to center, and I like Lampe there. I think that's a lock. Alexfree Planes is another interesting case because he's not the quickest guy in the outfield, right? But he has a heck of an arm, just throwing guys out from right
And
field.
you have to put his bat
And you
in the
need his
lineup.
bat in the lineup for sure. I was between right and designated hitter with Planes, but I'm gonna throw him in right just because he can gun guys out at the plate. And then left field, you had a lot of options. You could have went. Obviously, I said you could have moved Khalil and made a change there. You could have went Tyrese Turner. I'm sure Jorge Burgos, but he's not the greatest fielder either. His bat is awesome. Kind of the same deal with Planes. So I'm going to go with Guy Lipscomb. He's just been the hottest guy at the plate. His glove has been amazing, and that's where I'm going to go for my left fielder. And then in my designated hitter spot, just by default, the best bat available is Aaron Bracho. And when you put him in the DH spot, his numbers have been significantly better when he's only hitting compared to when he's out in the field. So I'm going to go with Aaron Bracho for my last DH spot on my pretty much roster. I'll throw to you if you kind of want to touch on the outfield or maybe who you would have in your DH.
I think I just want the people to understand how insanely difficult this is. And it's a very good problem to have. But I mean, a lot of quality players that are left out of that lineup are, again, Jorge Burgos, who has 3 home runs. Yes, his bat has struggled, but he's got 3 home runs here. Of course, Cooper Engel, you could throw him in that DH spot as well and sit Aaron Bracho on the bench. And honestly, with this lineup, that's kind of what I personally would prefer. Tyrese Turner, again, for the limited number of times he's played, he's hitting above 300 when he is in a Rubberducks uniform. That can be invaluable here as well. And again, like you mentioned with Planes in the outfield, would you rather play Tyrese Turner for a guy that you know can get on base and that can be pretty fast? He's got 5 stolen bases in 14 games and hasn't been caught stealing once. He's a speedster on the base pass. I think, again, the interesting thing to try to figure out with this Akron lineup is it really is going to depend on the opponent that you are playing. But we know DeCenzo, and game by game by game, the lineup always changes. Always. There's always at least 2 or 3 guys in tomorrow's lineup that were not in today's lineup, or that were in yesterday's lineup that are not in today's, right? It changes all of the time, and you have so many quality players that you could play here. It depends on what sort of style DeCenzo wants. If he wants a team that can get on the base paths and run and try to match the offensive output of Erie a little bit, I know we keep alluding to that. I promise we will get there. I'd throw a guy like Tyrese Turner in that lineup. That's when you would put Cooper Engel back there at catcher to sort of match the offensive output. If you really trust your pitching, you trust Austin Peterson with the game in his hand, which I don't know about you. I definitely would. I would trust Davenport with the game ball in his hand. Sure. I would trust a guy like Messick, who's going to pitch game 2. Figuring out this lineup is just such a tricky feat because you have a ton of guys that can play everywhere. I really, really like your infield. And the one thing that I maybe might change is if you end up moving Milan Tolentino to second, Watson can go play the DH, and then you can throw a guy like Frias for his defense at third. But I like I like your infield a lot. I think that's where it needs to stay. The catcher position there, I like Cody Huff for his defense. In the end, his bat has been reliable at times. I think Lipscomb and Lampe are the 2 guys you have to play in that outfield. But then again, what do you do with right field and DH? You could put Tyrese Turner there and then Planes at DH, but then you're also sacrificing the bat of Bracho, which, look, has been inconsistent up to this point. I know he has a lot of potential. I'm not the biggest Aaron Bracho guy. I think a guy like Cooper Engel might suffice a little bit better in the designated hitter position, especially with what he's shown you throughout the course of his time in Akron.
You want power.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, you absolutely get what I'm saying, and I think the people out there get what I'm saying too. It's just so hard to try to put a lineup together because it really does depend on what style you want. If you want small ball, Tyrese Turner, Cooper Engel are guys that, and maybe even a guy like Dion Frias will be guys you see there in that lineup. If you want big power, I mean, you're obviously going to put a guy like Jorge Burgos in there, and Planes very well might end up playing the DH position. And I'm really curious to see the lineup that DeCenzo rolls out there, unless it's anything absolutely crazy, like Tolentino's not even in the outfield, or
I can very well see that.
Yeah,
which is crazy.
Yeah,
But
nothing is out of
anything's
the ordinary.
possible. So
Okay, we got to move on here to the pitching side. We've talked a lot about the Akron Bats. Let's move on to the pitching side here, really, really quickly. And let's touch on just the guys that we know that are going to be pitching. So Austin Peterson is obviously getting the start there in Game 1, and whether it's Peterson or Davenport, again, that kind of tells me that DeCenzo feels like Davenport is his best guy. And if they want to go, which again, we all know where we both lie. You're a Davenport guy. I'm an Austin Peterson guy. I just think Peterson a tick better. You think Davenport a tick better. Regardless, one of them was going to start Game 1. It happened to be Peterson. And with Parker Messick getting the nod for Game 2,
I think a lot that also played into that. Sorry to cut you off, but I mean, I think a lot that played into that too was kind of how the rotation fell off. Not fell off, but like kind of progressed through the Hartford series. I mean, Davenport pitched Friday, and that's a quick turnaround for a guy like Davenport to really go. To where Peterson and Messick, they pitched the Wednesday, Thursday, I'm pretty sure, of that series.
Yep. And then
I might be mistaken, but Tommy Mace obviously a guy who just pitched.
Yep. And then you would have a week between Davenport pitching if he's going to now go pitch Game 3. If there is a Game 3 to be had on Friday, if not, if somehow the Ducks are able to sweep, which, spoiler alert for my prediction, I don't think is going to happen, is something that we could see there as well. But I mean, you take a look at Peterson, 2.88 ERA, leads the team in WHIP. I think might even lead the Eastern League in WHIP at sub-1. He only allows opponents to hit 210 while he is in a Ducks uniform. Again, I'm just reading Ducks stat here. I think the ERA might be a tick higher than 2.88 throughout his season. I think the WHIP and average just a little tick higher, but throughout his time in Akron, I mean, 75 innings, only given up 24 runs, struck out 72 guys while only walking 15. He's only hit one batter, only given up 5 home runs. And the thing that the stat sheet will not tell you is the pace at which he pitches. If he can speed up this Erie lineup and make them swing their bats wildly and crazy, that's going to bode well for the Ducks there in Game 1.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you touched on it. I think Peterson, I think he's our number 2 of the staff, and I think Messick is the 3. So I think you're bringing 2 out of your 3 best guns, and if it obviously goes to Game 3, you're going to have Thor on the mound. So obviously,
and Parker Messick, by the way. So sorry to cut you off. I got you back. Parker Messick has a complete game this season. He's one of the only Eastern League pitchers to do that this year, and it was a shutout. It was a complete game, just a full dominant performance from Parker Messick, which I don't know about you. I know it's one game and pitchers can string together their best stuff in one game. It happens all the time. So there are a ton of random perfect games and no hitters throughout MLB history. But like, wait, do you even remember who that guy is? Yeah. Right. Obviously you have like your Randy Johnsons and whatnot, but there are a couple guys that just aren't coming to mind right now that you look at, really? He threw a no hitter. He threw a perfect game, but Parker Messick is the guy to go deliver Game 2. And then again, if there's a Game 3 to be had, Davenport, I think, is going to get that nod. The official starting pitcher's not been named yet, but I can't imagine it being anybody other than Aaron Davenport. He's had a week of rest by that point. Again, to what I believe and what you believe, or what I believe DeCenzo believes and what you believe as well, is that Davenport is the best pitcher on the staff. I think that's what DeCenzo believes, and I think, again, with the quick turnaround and everything, him pitching Game 3, perfect.
Yeah, for sure, 100%. And then you mentioned just the length that Messick goes, and a guy like Peterson, he also goes 6-7 innings too if you need it. That's gonna be huge for the bullpen if they can really just get through those solid innings. I mean, I don't want to throw them out there. Say if they're still giving up consistent runs, don't play around with that. You have a full bullpen to your disposal, obviously, to use. But if they're dealing, I would leave him out there, especially a guy like Messick who has the distance to go. And another thing I'm sure we'll touch on here in a little bit, if not right after this, with the bullpen.
Well, I was just about to go there. Yep.
Yeah, but just a great bullpen. So if you want to go right into the bullpen, we can.
Sure. I mean, should we just start? I mean, should we just start listing off names at this point? I mean, there are really too many to list. How about this? Let's go with guys that have a sub-3 ERA in the Akron Rubberducks bullpen. Get ready for this list: Bradley Hanner, Lenny Torres. Let's keep going. Alaska Abney, Trenton Denholm, Zane Morehouse, Mason Hickman. all of those guys sub-3 ERA. They come out of the bullpen, and they all have been fantastic in a Rubberducks uniforms. There are a couple guys that you could say, okay, they haven't been too great, at least comparatively speaking to everyone else, but they can still get the job done. Magnus Ellerts is one of those guys that can still come in and get the job done.
I think Ellerts has been great all season.
Oh,
I
yeah.
love Ellerts. I mean, his ERA might not show it, but I like Ellerts a lot.
5-0 record. Is that I'm reading that? Yep. 18 hits, 9 earned runs, 24 strikeouts over 20 and 2/3 innings. Does allow opponents to hit 240 off of him. But I mean, this bullpen, it very much is a Cleveland Guardians-esque thing. If you can have the lead into the 6th or 7th, for the most part, this bullpen is going to be able to shut things down.
As you said, yeah, for the most part, the bullpen has been able to shut things down with Abney, who I love, and Hanner and Torres, and you just have so much depth. I mean, and then when you even get into the lesser part of it, a guy like not taking them down, but like Sharp and Ross Carver, they've struggled a little bit this season, but they've still been pretty solid throughout.
And I know your feelings on this name that I'm about to mention, but I think you would be surprised to find out that Sir Mr. Jack Leftwich has a lower ERA than both Carver and Sharp. He's been pretty solid throughout the second half. You can't deny that. You can't deny that.
No, I will argue with that. He has not been solid by any means. He's a weird case because his numbers, if you look at them, they're not as I'm trying to find the right words how to phrase this. When he goes in and the game is on the line, it kind of just ends with us in the loss column. But when he goes in and he has like a 5
leader and saves for the Rubberducks might tell you otherwise. He's got 10 on the year. No one else has more than 7.
I want to say Hanner does, doesn't he?
No, Hanner's got 6. Torres has 7.
I mean, still though, I could count the amount of times that he has gone in and equally is just given up.
You could also count the number of times he saved the game for him. I know your feeling on Mr.
But
Leftwich.
when you look at his strikeouts, he doesn't put guys away. They kind of just don't hit off.
Neither does Carver and neither do Carver and Sharp according to the stats. He's got a much better K per 9 ratio than those two
I never
guys.
really said that Carver or Sharp are dominant in the strikeout range either way, but I wouldn't play around with it at all. I would go. In fact, if you want to, I made a little pitching rotation that I would like to kind of throw up.
Well, the bullpen, sure.
Where I want everybody to go. So obviously, this was before I saw what happened earlier, with Peterson and Messick obviously starting. But if this was up to me, I would have Davenport going game 1. Let's just replace that with Peterson, just for now. So I think Peterson could go 5 innings around there. After that, you don't mess around at all. You put in Hanner and you put in Torres, 2 of the best relievers in the league, and I think they're the best relievers in the entire league. I think they can go 2 innings each if Peterson goes 5, and if not, I think you go Hanner 2, Torres 1. Boom, done. Game 2 is going to be Parker Messick. I think Messick goes 4. I think you throw Denholm in for 3 to 4, and then I like Alaska Abney to come close this thing out. And then in a Game 3 scenario, if you kind of want to unload another starter here, because I went the major league route where you're only using 3 guys per series, I like in this case Davenport pitching maybe 4 or 5, and then Tommy Mace coming in for a little bit, and then right back to Hanner to close it out. I know that's probably not what they're going to do because you have to get guys work in the minor leagues, but if you're in a win now mentality, I'm pitching Hanner until his arm falls off or he says he can't go anymore. Lenny Torres until he says he can't go anymore. And then Abney. And if you need a 4th bullpen guy, if you don't want to utilize your starters, I would probably go with Magnus Ellerts. Believe it or not, I just really like the stuff that he brings, and I think he can get out of some jams.
The only thing that I would probably counter with that is, again, to your point, I think the bullpen usage is going to be a lot higher, and we very well might see a guy like Hanner or Torres, maybe even a guy like Abney pitch more than once within this series if it calls for it. I actually really like what you did there with the Messick to Mace thing. Now, obviously, I don't think it's going to be Messick to Mace, but I do like having Tommy Mace sort of not necessarily on the back burner, but as we're about to talk about in literally 2 minutes, if Erie starts to really, really hit and Messick or Peterson or Davenport just cannot get out of that first inning, that second inning, that third inning, bring in Tommy Mace.
Oh yeah, for sure.
That's another guy that, hey, look, with all due respect to Tommy Mace, you're probably not going to start him in a championship series if you end up getting that far. You're probably still going to go with Peterson, Messick, and Davenport. So if need be, I think Tommy Mace needs to be that guy to come in long relief if need be. And the one other thing that I would say is I would be slightly concerned about Alaska Abney pitching in a closing role, just because in 26 appearances for the Ducks this year, he only has 1 save, and he's only had 2 save opportunities. The guys that they've brought in the most for save opportunities have been Hanner, Torres, and Leftwich. No other guy has more than 5, and that would go by the way of Davis Sharp. So, I mean, just when you're taking a look at pitchers that are going to close games, I think I would split up Hanner and Torres, unless, of course, you desperately need both of them to come in and pitch. I think Alaska Abney would be more suffice to pitch a 2-inning role than rather a closing role. And other than that, I think you did a really good job. I do like the Magnus Ellert's pick, 16 appearances, 3 save opportunities.
And I wish we still had my boy Trey Benton, because he would definitely be in there too. Veteran presence, dude brings a lot. I would definitely throw him in there for sure.
Absolutely. I think we've touched on pretty much everything that the people need to know about the Rubber Ducks. If we have any questions from the chat about the Ducks, we can answer them here really fast before we move on to Erie, because we got to preview this team.
Got nothing at the moment. Let's go to Erie.
All right, so let's talk about Erie for a second. When you take a look at the top 30 prospects that are in AA right now, you have one in Hao-Yu Lee, who is top 10. You have to go to Troy Melton, the next one, a right-handed pitcher at 11th. And by the way, Hao-Yu Lee, a second baseman, an infield prospect. Get out of here, fly. Max Anderson is in AA right now. He's another infield prospect that also plays second. And then Eric Silva as a pitcher. But other than that, I mean, only 4 guys are right now in AA in the organization. And I mean, those first 2 guys that I mentioned, Hao-Yu Lee and Troy Melton, currently, according to MILB.com, and again, I don't know Erie's injury situation at all, but this definitely could be something that changes. A guy like Troy Melton, who is leading the pitching staff, not necessarily in ERA, but is leading it in innings, is leading it in strikeouts, is on the 7-day IL right now. And you move on down to Hao-Yu Lee, who is hitting darn near 300. I think you mentioned before the show is what, 3rd or 2nd in the Eastern League in batting average. He's on the 7-day IL as well. And when you go down further, Trey Cruz has been what played earlier this year. He's been hurt, is out for the rest of the season. Jake Holton is on the 60-day right now.
Ton of injuries with it.
Yeah, you take a look at a guy like TJ Hopkins, an outfielder. He's been hurt for the entirety of this season. You keep going with this pitching staff. Tyler Madison is hurt. Wilkel Hernandez right now is on the development list. Michael Bienlien, and I probably butchered that name, so I apologize profusely. He's on the development list right now. There's just a ton of guys that they're either not with the organization, not with the team, in either an injury role, a development role, and that definitely is going to hurt them. But when you go away from Hao-Yu Lee, and again, if he plays in the series or not, that is extremely, extremely impactful. He has 12 home runs, and again, is hitting almost 300 with the best OPS on the team among qualified hitters in only 87 games this season. He has 102 hits, 55 runs scored, 56 RBIs, and again, the aforementioned 12 home runs. But man, this team scores a ton of runs. There are doing some quick math right now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There are 8 or 9 guys on this team that have over 45 RBIs on the season. That is insane. Chris Myers, Gage Workman, who we know as really gives the Akron Rubberducks hell, for lack of better terminology, when he comes in there to play. Both of those guys have 18 home runs on the season. Jake Holton has 14 home runs. And by the way, all 3 of those guys that I've just mentioned are hitting above 250. So are these next 2 guys, Ben Malgiri and Eliezer Alfonso. That Alfonso has 9 home runs. Brady Allen has 9 home runs. Trey Cruz has 9 home runs there as well. Again, I think we mentioned that he is on the IL currently. So sad to see there for. I actually am going to fact check that because I don't remember if I said Trey Cruz was on the. Oh yes, he is. Yep, he hurt himself and I think is out for the rest of the season. So you got some injuries to work through here, man. Hao Yu Lee and Trey Cruz, those are big time injuries to a team that really, really needed their bats, and you're going to need some other guys to come up and step in and play some really big roles. Max Anderson, who just got called up, is going to need to be one of those guys that steps up and plays a huge role for them. But I mean, we were talking before the show with Hao Yu Lee and Trey Cruz in the lineup, there's not a weak spot in it. This entire team can hit. With those two players out, your 7, 8, 9 might be a weak spot, but the top 6 is what this Akron rotation will have to worry about. Myers, Workman, Holton, Malgiri, Alfonso, Allen, Murr, Mendoza, they all can hit.
Yeah, Hao Yu Lee's obviously, he's the main guy. I mean, he's second in the entire league in batting average. So that just in itself, it just, and Trey Cruz, for that matter, both of them is just a huge, just bad news for Erie.
Both of them 100 hit players here on this team. And to give you an idea of how good Erie is in hitting, again, as I just mentioned, Hao Yu Lee and Trey Cruz both have at least 100 hits on the season. There are still four other guys on this team that have at least 100 hits. That's how good of an offensive team Erie is. I think you have some stats for them as a team, but I think they're off the top of my head, first in batting average, first in OPS. I'm not going to try to guess anymore. You go ahead and take it away.
So, I mean, just off out of the gate, they rank let me see real quick. They're third in the league in home runs, and they are second in batting average. So they are as good as a hitting team that you're going to get outside of
second in OPS there as well. I'll correct myself.
Yeah, outside of Portland. So this is easily the team that's given the Ducks the most trouble, even though they have split the season series at, I want to say 9 apiece. We were talking about
9 apiece.
Yep, 9 apiece.
It's a very similar situation when you talk about Lake County and Dayton, how they split their season series. These two teams have split as well. And we actually got a little preview series here of these two teams just a little bit ago, maybe about a month ago. And again, a series that they split.
Another split, right? But I think the biggest part of this Erie offense, especially when they play Akron, I've stressed it to you many times, has been Ben Malgiri. He has been the Ducks killer. It is insane. Every time we play him, he is like, I can't think of his name. Not Eric Gonzalez, the dude for Gio Urshela for the Guardians.
I can't stand it when he
comes alive every single time against the Guardians. He won't do anything when he's not playing us. When he plays us, he turns into Babe Ruth. That's kind of the same thing with Ben Malgiri. It's insane just the gear this dude flips, and he's solid throughout the year. I mean, against Akron, he's hit 270 all year. His numbers have just been insane. But he's coming with big hits against Akron, too. It's not just he's hitting 270 and it's a single here or there. No, he's won games for Erie against Akron, and it's just been constant. So I think that's a huge piece, if not the biggest piece in Erie's offense by far.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we touched on a lot of this Erie offense again when we sort of talk about Akron, and we really don't know who's going to come through for this team in a big moment. It's for Erie, it's the same sort of problem, except it's not uncertainty about, I really wonder which guy's going to come through. It's just a matter of, okay, someone's going to come through. It's just who's it going to be tonight. Again, you have 9 guys, I think minus Hao Yu Lee and Trey Cruz, you have 6 or 7 guys that have at least 45 RBIs on the season, and Austin Murr is not too far behind with 37 of his own. This entire team hits, this entire team slugs, they can hit home runs, they get on base. The one thing that they don't do necessarily abnormally well, okay, well, never mind. I was going to say they don't steal bases well, but now that I'm looking at it, yeah, they do. Gage Workman is 30 of 43. Hao Yu Lee was 16 of 17. Obviously, he's hurt. Ben Malgiri is 20 of 24. And Carlos Mendoza is 32 of 37. Everyone else has sprinkled some stolen bases in there as well with a lot of caught stealings. But Mendoza and Malgiri and Workman, they all can steal bags.
For sure. I mean, there's not a single piece of that Erie offense that slacks. They can steal bases. They can hit the ball for contact. They can hit the ball for power. They can draw walks if they need to. That Erie if they want to win this series, is on the offensive side of the ball, because their pitching isn't bad necessarily, but it's not nowhere near on the level of Akron's. It's stayed consistently solid all season.
Well, and again, kind of like we just said there a little bit ago, injuries have really hurt them. I mean, the top two guys in strikeouts, even though they don't post the best win-loss records, which, again, we know to us mean nothing, they also don't post the best ERAs, which doesn't mean nothing. Troy Melton and Wilkel Hernandez, Melton on the IL, Hernandez on the development list, both the only two guys with over 100 strikeouts for Erie this year. Probably we're both not going to see here in this series. And again, we don't know who the starting pitchers are for Erie as we are sitting down and recording this. With our luck, something will probably come out literally after we hit done, right? That happened with Lake County. That literally happened with Lake County.
I'm going to check right now just to make sure that
check right now.
Again.
But while you are checking, I mean, even another guy that Erie could rely on a whole bunch, and Jackson Joby, who pitched really well for them this season, is at the AAA level right now. So you can't even, he's in AAA. I know this is the Pittsburgh team. What's AAA for Pittsburgh?
Indianapolis.
That's right. Yep. So he's in AAA Indianapolis right now. And he was by far their best starting pitcher all season long. Now, if you want my opinion on who's going to see starting pitching here, I think the first guy you look to is Carlos Pena, 8-6 on the season, 3.49 ERA.
And actually, I just found out their starters on their.
Go for it. Let's do it. Oh, praise the Lord. Okay.
Game 1 for the Erie Seawolves, who will be going again. Who's your guess?
Carlos Pena.
He's game 2.
Game 2. Okay.
Game,
so game
1 is going to be Austin Bergner.
Okay, so let me tell you a little bit about Austin Bergner. 10 starts this season, and that's all the games he's appeared in. 3-2 record, 2.34 ERA in 50 innings, has struck out 64 batters. My goodness, 17 runs, 13 of those earned, 20 walks, only 2 hit batters, giving up 5 home runs, allows opponents only to hit 189 with a 106 whip. I mean, with a guy like Troy Melton not necessarily having his best stuff this season, and your leader in strikeouts gone, leader in ERA and whip and batting average, Austin Bergner, I think, is the perfect guy for this team to start there in game 1. And then I was talking about Carlos Pena earlier. You said he's in game 2. Perfect. If you are a fan of the Erie Seawolves out there, getting Bergner to start in game 1 and Pena to start in game 2, I think is exactly what needs to happen.
For sure. 100%. I think they went with their strongest gun in game 2. Which you're not in the minor leagues, you're not really throwing your ace in game 1. It doesn't seem like, of course. I mean, obviously you can make the argument that Peterson's the one, but if you want to go in that order, then Davenport would definitely be second.
I think you could, you can obviously make the case that Peterson is one, just to talk about the Ducks for a little bit. I think, again, just the sentiment that I will echo again is the fact that, like what you said, I don't think you pitch your ace in game 1. Of course, Lake County did with them. Matt Wilkinson pitched game 1 of the series against Dayton, but obviously in the championship series, you didn't pitch him game 1. He's your ace. You didn't pitch him yesterday on Sunday. You're going to pitch him tomorrow on Tuesday. And it just echoes to me that you feel like DeCenzo feels like Davenport is the number 1 guy, with Peterson being the 2. That's why he's getting the start in game 1, but we'll go ahead and move on here. So Pena and Bergner, do they have a game 3 starter? Or is
I was just about to say they do have their game 3 starter out.
So who's their game 3 starter?
If necessary, it will be Garrett Burren.
Okay, so Garrett Burren, 6-1 on the year, 3.91 ERA, 91 strikeouts over 94 in the 3rd innings pitched, 42 runs, 41 of those have been earned, 38 walks, 1.38 whip, and 2.59 batting average. And I think especially if Davenport is the guy
what
there.
Was ERA?
ERA 3.91.
3.91. Okay, so I love our chances in a game 3.
Yeah. I was about to say, especially if what we believe to be true, if Davenport is going to get the ball in game 3, I mean, that bodes well for the Ducks. And I mean, you go ahead and you take a look at this Erie Seawolves bullpen here as well, as we got to move on to the prediction here pretty fast. They got a ton of guys that have pitched a lot of football or not football. Oh my goodness, I got football on the brain. It's football season. There's a lot of football happening, that have pitched at least 40 baseball games for them this season. Jake Higginbotham has pitched 41 games. RJ Pettit has pitched 43. Tim Naughton has pitched 43. Joel Puguero has pitched 43, and Calvin Coker has pitched 41. All of those guys have at least 50 innings of work. Again, all of those guys have pitched at least, again, as I said, 40 games, all of them in relief. And even though they may not have the best stats, this bullpen has a lot of guys that's pitched a lot of baseball, and that experience is going to come in well here during the postseason.
100%. I think obviously their pitching staff's going to need to step it up, especially from the bullpen side, because they don't have the greatest bullpen in the minor leagues, specifically Eastern League. Not saying that that's going to be the decision factor in this, but in the later part of the games, that will very well play a role. So
it's time, my friend. We are going to move on to our keys to the series here really fast. 2 keys from you, 2 keys from me, 1 offensive, 1 defensive. Where's this series going to be won? How's this series going to play out? We'll start with you. Tell us about Erie and Akron.
So on the offensive side for me, number 1, the bats have to stay consistent. There's been a lot of games that I've seen where we either go for 1 hit or we go for 12 hits. And I think it starts from the bottom up. I think Tolentino is going to have a big game. Obviously, we mentioned Kafis, and then the younger guys are going to have to step up, because I do believe that there's going to be a lot of pinch hits in this series with Lipscomb, Tyrese Turner, Cooper Ingle, Jorge Burgos, just those guys like that. I think they're going to really need to step up. So for me, it's just kind of just consistency on the offensive side of things. And a guy who I really think has to have a big series for Akron for them to have a chance is Joe Lampe. I love everything Lampe's about, and I would love to see him in that leadoff spot. He's quick around the bases. He gets on. He has a good OPS. I just love everything Lampe's about. I think if he has a really good game or a really good series, and same thing with Kafis, he's going to be the vocal point to drive in some runs. Alexri Planes as well on the power side of things. So I just think consistency throughout the offense is obviously my number 1 thing.
Well, we'll go to sort of where I think this series is going to be won. I think it is absolutely going to be, if Akron can shut down Erie's bats, great.
For sure.
That's going to bode well for Akron, because I do think we saw what happens when there is something on the line, when the hype around Akron making the playoffs. And look, if they can get 1, 2, maybe 3 games against Bowie, they were going to have a really good shot to go ahead and make those, or I should say make the postseason, right? When there is hype around this team and when people get talking about Akron, the bats do come alive, but the pitching staff has to limit what Erie is able to do. That is where this series is going to be won. Like you said, the bats have to be hot for Akron. Yes, they have to be going on a semi-consistent basis. I don't think the bats here have to be absolutely fantastic considering what your bullpen does. It's kind of like a Cleveland Guardians situation, right? You need the bats to be good enough, drive in some runs, give run support to your pitchers, who for the most part have been fantastic this season. But Akron did not finish the season well. They've got to be able to find some momentum. They have to be able to get those bats rolling. But the pitching staff, and especially that bullpen, has to be excellent, because Erie, especially in late game situations, have been really, really good throughout the season. They've had a ton of really impressive comeback wins. They've, again, have some really, really good moments late in games. But, I mean, come on. You're talking about the king of comeback wins and the king of walk-offs in the Eastern League. It's the Akron Rubberducks. I couldn't tell you how many walk-offs I had to string, or I watched or wrote a post-game recap for this summer, because man, it seemed like they would walk off every other game.
How fitting would that be, too? Last time we were in the playoffs, our last playoff game was that championship back in 21, where Bo Naylor hit a walk-off to just win the entire thing.
Again, storyline would be set here. Okay, I think we've sort of detailed everything we need to know. Any questions from the people before we dive on into the predictions?
Nothing much.
Okay, we'll start with you. This is just going to be a fun series. I'm going to go ahead and predict your prediction right now. Do you have this thing going to 3 games? Because I know I do. I think Akron takes 1 and Erie takes 2.
Wow. Okay, I have this going 3. I think Peterson is going to be lights out tomorrow. I think the bats are going to stay rolling, and I think my prediction's going to be right. You're going to go with your best relievers. You're going to go with Hanner, and I know Lenny Torres pitched yesterday. I would love him to pitch tomorrow, but if not, I could see Abney also getting in there, and I think Peterson's going to go a long distance to where you're not going to mess around with any of the other more so inconsistent guys out of the bullpen. So I have Akron taking game 1. Then you're going to obviously go to Erie. And
May I throw in an additional prediction in here as well? I have Akron taking game 1 in walk-off fashion. I can't tell you who it's going to be. I would love it to be Milan Tolentino because he's the walk-off guy. He is the walk-off guy. I can't tell you who it's going to be because it's different every day for Akron, but I have them taking game 1 in walk-off fashion.
So then you go to Erie, game 2. You're going obviously up against one of their better pitchers. So I think Messick is he'll do solid. I think he's gonna go more so 5 to 6 innings with about 3 runs given up, and then I think you might get a guy out of the bullpen who's a little shaky, gives up another run with 4, but I think they're gonna be more so shut down. Bats might not be as hot. I think it might be more so of a little bit of a score prediction. I think it's going to be like a 4-2 Erie win in that game.
So I'm with you, and I think Erie wins game 2. But I think I think the bats come out and blitz Akron. I'm thinking that might be like a 9-4 game. I really believe that for as good as Messick is, I think down 1-0 in the series, especially if they do happen to lose that game 1. And all of this is meaningless, by the way, if Erie happens to win game 1. But I'm going off the thought that Akron wins game 1 here.
For sure.
I think the bats are just going to come out hot. And we've seen Erie put up crazy numbers and runs. I think they're second in runs scored across the entire Eastern League, second in runs batted in. They score a ton of runs. They do it in a ton of different ways. And especially Akron going on the road to play in that environment, I don't think they're going to be ready for it. Maybe the bats for Akron get hot late, but it'll be too late. And I think Erie blitzes Akron. They take game 2 by quite a wide margin there. I think the offense explodes for the Seawolves.
Yeah, I have another kind of prediction too. You mentioned Ben Malgeri. I think he homers twice in this game. I think he's got a vengeance on his mind, maybe 4 to 5 RBIs. I think he's going to have a huge game 2. So then that's going to push it to game 3. And if you know me, with the ball in Davenport's hands, I don't think I trust the guy more in the game of baseball for a game 3 with our season on the line more than Thor. So with Davenport being on the mound in game 3, I'm not going to bet against them. I think the bats are going to wake up. Obviously, that walk-off type of mentality at the top of the 8th, top of the 9th, obviously can't be a walk-off because you're playing away. But I think late, you're going to get a rally started. I think you're going to go back to just a dominant hand and probably Lenny Torres, who's just going to be lights out. Mangus Ellerts possibly. Maybe Bradley Hanner again. I'd love to see him go at least twice in this series because the dude's just a freaking nature out of that bullpen. So I think Akron's going to pull out a very close one in game 3, possibly a 5-4 type of score. And I think Davenport is going to pick up the win, and so will the Ducks. And they're going to be going on to play the winner of Hartford and Somerset.
I hate to do this. I really, really do. But I think Erie's going to win this series. I think even with Davenport on the mound in game 3, I think especially if you're going to be using some of your better guys in the bullpen for more than one game in this series, like if you have to pitch Torres in game 1 to survive and game 3 to try to, come back and win you that game, I think the environment will be a little bit too much for Akron. And again, it's a very similar yet a lot different of problem when you're talking about Akron and sort of who's going to step up and create the big hit versus again, you shift the tone with Erie. It's okay, who's going to get the big hit today? And I think that absolutely matters. And more often than not, the teams that have the hottest pitching in postseason baseball, or I say the hottest bats in postseason baseball, the hottest bats in postseason baseball do really, really well. Now, I also know the cliche that bullpens win in October. This isn't October. This is September. I think the bats are going to win this series for Erie. I would love it if the Ducks could prove me wrong, and I will let you give me the all of the I told you so's in the entire world. But I do think that Erie's bats are going to help them win this series. I think the Ducks take game 1. They win their final home game of the season, but Erie takes 2 and 3. I got the Seawolves moving on to the Eastern League Championship.
You do put up a good point with the bullpen arm and a guy maybe going more than once. I think if there's a bullpen out there, it's going to be Akron, who can throw a guy more than once. But an interesting name you threw out, and I know you didn't mean it on purpose. To the point I'm going to make is Lenny Torres. The last time he pitched in Erie, you mentioned the environment. That was by far, I think, the only bad series I've seen out of Lenny Torres. So it'll be very interesting to see if Torres.
I actually didn't even realize that connection had been made. So props to you for thinking about that.
And I think the only time he ever got rocked like twice in a series was that Erie series. Otherwise, he was just lights out the rest of the year. But Erie sort of got to him in Erie. So I wonder if the Seawolves, just the atmosphere there, and they can kind of just get to him. Another reason why I want to see Hanner twice instead of Lenny Torres. Obviously, I love Lenny Torres. I think the dude's the best reliever we have. But when it comes down to kind of saving the game and it being really close, I'd like to see Hanner, especially against Erie, just because he's had a better track record. And I think if we can see Hanner twice, and obviously the rest of the pitching up to that be consistent, I think we have a good chance of winning.
Again, I have Erie taking the series in 3. I just think the bats are going to be hotter than Akron's. They're going to be able to get to the bullpen a little bit more effectively, especially at home. That's why I think Erie will win that game. A lot more consistency from their bats throughout the course of the season. Hey, any questions from the chat here? We maybe can talk guard ball for 5-ish minutes, and then I got to go prepare for a softball game.
We got none at the moment.
Okay, shall we talk a little? Let's put the graphic. Hang on, let's time this up right.
Ready?
Okay. Well, second delay. Oh, stupid technology. I blame technology for that. Okay, shall we dive on into a little bit of guard ball, my friend? This is probably something that we may come on and give our own little thoughts about how the Guardians are going to do once all the minor league postseason wraps up. Of course, we'll be watching the Columbus Clippers as well, and if they happen to make the playoffs again, magic number is 1. We will have a Columbus Clippers playoff series preview for you here. But for Guardians fans out there, all of which you should be, I don't know why else you'd be watching this podcast otherwise, but please don't go away if you're not a Guardians fan. Right now, they are 1 game behind the New York Yankees for the top spot in the American League. With 12 games left, here are the magic numbers that the Guardians need. And by the way, you have heard me throw out that phrase, magic number. Taven, I don't even know if you quite know what the magic number happens to mean. I'm sure you do. I'm not trying to insult your intelligence there by any point. But for anyone out there,
track on Akron's throughout the year.
But for everyone out there that doesn't know what a magic number is, it is basically the combination of wins your team needs to have and losses that the opposing team needs, or teams that are close to you in the standings, the combined total for you to clinch a certain thing. So for the Guardians, their magic number is 3 to secure a playoff spot. Obviously, if the Guardians win 3 games, there you go. That's it, said and done. And I don't even think the Guardians have to worry about that magic number of 3. I think they're going to get into the postseason regardless here. They have an above 99% chance to do it in most metrics, but secure a top 2 seed. Their magic number is 9. And for only having 12 games left, that's a very big number, which means they need a combination of 9 Guardians wins and Houston Astros losses for them to secure a top seed. But the interesting thing is that their magic number is also 9 to secure an AL Central title. So the magic numbers get a little bit of confusing when you put all the math and everything into it. But basically what needs to happen is what we've been saying pretty much the entire time we've talked about the Guardians
baseball
leading up to the postseason. As long as you play 500 baseball, you're going to get a top 2 seed. You're going to win the division. Well, you're going to get a playoff spot first and foremost. You're going to win the division, and then you're going to secure yourself a top 2 seed. It's as simple as that.
And I think this series is this in the Houston series definitely the biggest of the year, because this will solidify the Twins as pretty much out of it in the Central race.
Yeah, so the Twins right now are playing the Guardians. That game is actually going on as we speak. I'll give you people a little update about that. I think it's still 0-0 because I haven't gotten a score notification. Yep, top of 3, 0-0. So no score yet there from Cleveland. But again, this is an absolutely massive series because the Guardians are playing the Twins, and look, the Royals are playing the Tigers. How about them Detroit Tigers, man? They are the hottest team in baseball right now. And if they string together enough wins and they get hot enough and teams above them lose, especially with as big of a series here against Kansas City coming up, maybe, who knows, maybe they can beat Minnesota for that second wild card spot. Do I think it's going to happen? No, for the record, I do not. But I mean, for an AL race that we thought, okay, the closest team to it might be the Boston Red Sox. Nope. It's been the Detroit Tigers.
Yeah, I think the Tigers, I mean, they have a legitimate shot at it. I don't think it's going to happen either. I think Minnesota is going to win. And I think for this series, it's a best of 4. So I think you at least have to split with Minnesota. And if you do, you'll be fine.
So off the top of my head, I think it's Minnesota. Then there's a road series after that. I forget who it's against.
So it's Minnesota, then you hit the road against St. Louis, and then you come back home against Cincy for 2, and then you close things out with the Astros for 3.
Thank goodness we get the Astros at home. Thank goodness, because again, all that needs to happen is 3 wins or losses from Seattle or Boston or Minnesota or whoever. As long as you get 3 wins and play 500 baseball, you are in that playoff spot. And again, let's just do some quick math here, right? If the Guardians play 500 baseball and we know nothing else that has happened, right? We know nothing else. If the Guardians over their next 12 games go 6-6, you automatically cut that magic number from 9 to get a top 2 seed and to win the AL Central down to just 3, which means you need Houston to lose 3 games. You need Kansas City to lose 3 games. You need Minnesota to lose 3 games. Any combination there secures you exactly what you want and exactly what this team has been on pace to do since all the way back in May.
For sure. I mean, obviously you've hit a lot of rough patches, and a lot of that has been to like the starting lineup just going down, the starting pitching rotation, I should say. And even Kwan's been hurt for a little bit. And
Kwan hasn't even looked like himself either.
Will Brennan. So just guys like that who have gone down, and obviously losing Bieber and Gavin Williams at the beginning of the year, and Logan Allen hasn't been himself, and Carrasco hasn't been great, but he went down, and just guys like Boyd and Cobb, who Cobb isn't even healthy. So that even just kind of throws the point out there even more.
I think Boyd is pitching now.
Yeah, he's been on fire, and I love everything that Boyd's brought. But
Boyd is pitching tonight. Tomorrow, the Guardians have Williams, which we'll see how that one goes. After Williams, it's going to be Bybee, and then after Bybee, I think it'd be Cantillo. Yes, it is. So there's your 4 for the Minnesota series. I would love it if you took 3 of 4 from Minnesota, because you don't have to worry about the playoffs anymore. Boom, that's done. That is out of the way. And then with 9 games left, that magic number will probably be closer to 5 or 4 for that top 2 seed.
Yeah, for sure. My thing is, though, and I got a question for you. I'm confident in those 4 guys, just obviously throughout these series. Are you confident in our starting pitching staff to play the Houston Astros or the Twins or the Royals in the playoffs?
So I think I'm going to change your question, and I think I'm going to change your question to what team would the Guardians prefer to play in that first series? And I can tell you right now, the Baltimore Orioles is a hell to the no. Like, if we go up against Baltimore, that's going to be.
You want to play the Twins, Royals?
That's going to be. I'm thinking the Twins. I'm thinking the Twins.
Yeah.
I really am thinking the Twins.
MLB put out a graphic of who we would face at the moment.
At the moment, the winner of Minnesota and Houston, but I think there's reseeding now. Yeah. So if Houston won and Kansas City won, then Kansas City would go play Cleveland. Or heck, if Houston and Baltimore won. Oh no, if Houston Baltimore won, then Baltimore would go to New York. Oh no, wait, that wouldn't work out actually. So if Minnesota and Kansas City both win, that's the only way the Guardians could play Kansas. So if Minnesota wins the series, that's the only way that you could play Kansas City or Baltimore. So I'm going to think about it in terms of Kansas City, Baltimore, or Houston, because I don't think there's a conceivable way, if the standings continue to trend like they have been, if Minnesota is going to play the Cleveland Guardians. There's just, obviously that's what you want. That's the best case scenario, at least in my opinion, but that's impossible to get the way things are trending.
Is there reseeding?
I think you want the Astros.
For sure. Yeah, out of those teams, I think Baltimore just has way too much offensive power. Not
If
to
it
say
were up to
Houston
me, I would
does,
take
but
none of them. If it were up to me, I'd take none of them and put us in the
I would really like to play
ALCS.
I would really like to play Kansas City.
You would? Absolutely not. I don't want to get beat by Bobby
Really.
Witt and Raggins. And no,
So here's
I'm
my
not
thing.
confident in our ability. But
If
the
you
way that
really
you
look
have
at their
seen,
lineup,
but the way that you have seen, if you really look at their lineup, there's a lot of dogs in that lineup. If you take a look at how the Guardians have fared against the AL Central this year, it is not good. The
Yeah.
White Sox have 35 wins on the season, and 5 of them have been against the Cleveland Guardians. Five.
personally, I just don't think outside of Bobby Witt and Salvador Perez, there's not really a lot of power in that lineup or contact.
I
Really,
think you
pitching
are making
staff-
a big mistake in thinking
Really?
if the Guardians are thinking that too, that's a big mistake.
Here's also, and you don't want to underestimate him because obviously you haven't played anybody good in the central, like a good. You haven't played anybody in the Central good. Like even the White Sox have kind of you struggled with them.
Yes, I
But
follow along with what you're saying. Yes,
Right. Here's my thing though. Every time, and I know it's been 6 years since you've ran into Houston, but Houston seems to have our number 2, especially in the postseason, and I do not want to play them whatsoever either. I would rather play them more than Baltimore because they have Baltimore. I think is just really unstoppable, and they're really close to that number 1 seed with New York. But I'd rather, if you give me 2 choices, and obviously it's not going to be the Twins, Kansas City or Houston, I would rather take Kansas City because they're a younger team. I think there's more margin for error, like you saw with Baltimore last year. And that's one of my predictions with Baltimore. I didn't think Baltimore was going to make it past the first round, which they didn't because obviously they're too young. And I don't think a young team can really succeed in the playoffs. And I think that's the same thing with Kansas City.
Good point. Yeah,
so
you bring up
I'm
a
gonna go
very
with
good
Kansas
point.
City.
You bring up a very point in that regard, and just to play the other side of the coin here, Houston's a veteran team that has a lot of veteran pieces. But yeah, I mean, you bring up a really good point. Cleveland is, for the most part, a younger team, but they have a lot of veteran players on it. Stephen Kwan, even though this is only his 3rd or 4th season, you could consider a veteran player that knows what it takes to win in this league. Obviously, Jose Ramirez is one of the best players in the league. Josh Naylor has been here forever. The pitching staff has a lot of veteran guys on it too. And especially that bullpen. That bullpen has a ton of experience, and if they can get in the games, they can shut things down. I think this is the conversation that we need to stop for today, but we need to continue as the playoffs get closer because I definitely think we need to be throwing our own opinion. I know Believeland does a lot of coverage here around the Guardians. I see no reason to not throw our hats into the ring, the metaphorical Guardians talking show ring.
Yeah, for sure, 100%.
All right, I got to go prepare for a softball game, but before we do that, do we have anything from the chat at all?
We got a solid question right here. It's will Austin Hedges do the world a favor and retire before the playoffs?
And doing the world a favor, sir, is no. That Austin Hedges is he's not going to play much in any playoff series, but you need to keep him in the clubhouse from around. I mean, did you not see he won a World Series with Texas last year, and that is absolutely the sort of presence that you need in this clubhouse among a group of younger guys. If you get rid of Austin Hedges, and if Austin Hedges decides to retire, which by the way, he won't. No, but if you even like DFA Austin Hedges or release him, which I know Stephen Vogt and the Guardians won't, you're making a big mistake. I
don't think you should fully get rid of him. I think you should keep him around as a coach. And that's what a lot of people have been saying because you're right. He does bring morale to the clubhouse. Everybody likes him. And he's good defensively, but his bat, I think, is one of the worst I've ever seen. So
a blind squirrel finds a nut every now and again. And I feel like every time I say something negative about Austin Hedges, he gets a hit or we
got to keep that going. And we have to keep this going.
Yeah. We'll talk a lot of crap about Austin Hedges once we get off air. And maybe no, I'm kidding, Austin. If you somehow are listening, we love you. And I love everything that Austin Hedges is about from a morale standpoint.
Oh yeah, defense and morale, awesome.
And again, it is that just he's won a World Series ring. He has a ring on his finger, which I don't care how good or bad of a player you are perceived to be. Having the ring on your finger boosts morale in the clubhouse, and it boosts that sort of thing to be like, hey, we got a guy that's done this before. Why can't we do it with him on this team?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. Anything else from anybody? We should close out the show here. We've been going for almost an hour and a half, and appreciate everyone for listening. What did we get up to today?
55.
Okay, good. Good. Hey, it's an exciting time to be a Cleveland baseball fan. The Captains game 2 tomorrow, game 3 on Wednesday. Who knows? Maybe if they win, we'll come on do a little bit of a special show as well. Ducks, same thing, because I think if they make the championship series, they would start on Sunday as well. So we'd do another special show if the Ducks were to make the championship series. Next Monday will be all about the Columbus Clippers if they happen to make the postseason. And then obviously as minor league playoffs wind down and Guardians playoff baseball gets closer, we'll talk a lot of guard ball as well. Tavin, anything else from you?
Go Ducks. Got to get another one of these.
Let's go win us a softball game, and we'll see all of you in the next one. Peace out, everyone.